Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. This is Dari on World Streams Radio. Thank you to our listeners from all around the world for joining us. To learn more about World Streams, visit our website, worldstreams.org. You can also find us now on Facebook at facebook.com/worldstreams and facebook.com/worldstreams.worldmusic. Our guest tonight is Hamid Dabashi. Hamid Dabashi is the Hegop Kevorkian Professor of Iranian Studies and Comparative Literature at Columbia University in New York. Professor Dabashi is also a current affairs essayist, analyst, and commentator in major international newspapers and periodicals. He's regularly featured on CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and other global, national, and local venues. He has written 20 books and is also the author of over 100 articles on subjects ranging from Iranian studies, medieval and modern Islam, comparative literature, world cinema, and the philosophy of art, trans-aesthetics. Hi there, Saeed. Hello and welcome, Professor Dabashi. It's an honor and pleasure to have you with us on World Streams tonight.
Thanks for having me, Dari.
Well, hello, Dari, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for all our guests for joining us tonight. And good evening to you, Professor Hamid Dabashi. It's really an honor to have you. Professor Dabashi, we are 4 days away from the 10-year anniversary of 9/11. If you recall George Bush's speech when he said that Islam is a religion of peace, it was then a political narrative that served the heat of the moment. However, a media's narrative of stereotyping and alienating Muslims remains as the Muslims remain trapped in 9/11. Why do you think has the narrative continued from a media's perspective?
Thanks, Said, for having me, and thanks, Dari. It's a pleasure to be with you. The first thing I want to say about the media is the fundamental and really serious change that has happened in the very architecture of media over the last decade when September 11 happened in 2001, and now a few days from its first decade anniversary in 2011, namely a fundamental democratization of the media. Yes, there are still gargantuan global medias like CNN, which is now being challenged by Al Jazeera. But nevertheless, the things that have happened in the media by blogging and social networking and YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, etc., and the fact that through the Internet we have access through alternative media, that we are in a position to choose that New York Times is only a click away from Al Jazeera a click away from The Guardian, Le Monde, etc. We are no longer at the mercy of the dominant or hegemonic media. And I'm not either demonizing any one of them or celebrating any other one. This is, as we speak, is the age of WikiLeaks, namely a condition in world press that we ordinary citizens are for the first time in the position actually to sift through various data and decide for ourselves what is happening around the world. Yes, New York Times still believes itself to be the paper of the record, as they call themselves, but the fact of the matter is that they are no longer the solitary determinant of what it is that we think is happening around the globe. I do concur and agree with you that the dominant narrative of Islamophobia continues in the major media, more so in Europe than in the United States, I believe, if we do it comparatively. But nevertheless, I also believe that the dispersion of the outlets of news media and analysis that has happened over the last decade are very serious challenges to the dominant narrative that ordinarily we receive from these media.
So in terms of this dominant narrative, the degree of passivity has very much been less than predominantly before. But let's take, for example, Fox News is a major news channel here in the U.S., and most of the listeners, based on the statistics that were found and also the demographics, these are very passive listeners whose views about Muslims, for example, are very well shaped in reference to a patriotic point of view. That means that 911 has to have a victim, and the victim is the Muslims. Does this continue to be true, or is it less according to this degree of passivity of the listeners or the watchers?
Again, I agree with you that for a certain segment of American society, Fox News remains to be as you describe it. But I believe that media is a representation of demographic changes that happen in society at large. American society is changing. I've lived in this country now for almost 4 decades. And after the Civil Rights Act of 1968, for the entire decade of 1970s, for every 8 Asian and Latino that came to the United States,
right,
1 Western European came to this country. And in the decade of 1980s, for every 6 Asian and Latino, 1 Western European. So we have massive demographic changes that have happened. So far as Islamophobia is concerned, the fact is that Muslims used to be closet Muslims, and they have now come out, and they're more emphatic and more articulate in describing themselves as Muslims, articulating their political, social, and cultural positions. So the stereotypical and blasé and flat conception of Muslims that existed up until 9/11, 2001, no longer exists, not by virtue of the good heart of the media, but by virtue of the fundamental changes that demographically have happened in American society, and no longer the caricature of a people can be tolerated. Now, the fact of the matter is, people who watch outlets such as Fox News, they have already made up their minds. They go and watch Fox News for confirmation of their prejudices. Whereas if you take a larger look at society, I think American society, 300 million plus of them, they are by no stretch of imagination reducible to those who watch Fox News. Fox News also, remember, that is being funded by a certain kind of clientele and does not in any way represent the main line of American society. As we saw, if you compare, for example, if you take the last presidential election of 2008, Fox News was adamantly against President Obama. But the fact that not only President Obama was elected, but was elected with such euphoria, people who couldn't wait for the period of Bush to come to an end. This is not an affirmation of President Obama's policies, but simply as an indication that Fox News is not representative of, by any stretch of imagination, of the main core of American society.
Well, let's take this a little bit further. In terms of Muslims coming out of the closet, does that imply, if we were to compare the relationship that the immigrant, I'd like to actually take that to talk about the immigrant in general without talking about one religion in particular. If you see the relationship between immigrants and the media and the average person in Europe, it's much more heated than, are we expecting that in the United States the debate will be more heated in the future years to come?
Yes, it will be heated. The fact is that I'm happy you changed the direction to labor, migration in general, because Muslim labor migration is a component of larger frame of reference, which is labor migration. And again, by and large, American society, by virtue of its economy, not by virtue of its more tolerant culture, by virtue of its economy, has had to absorb more immigrants. But nevertheless, as you see, for example, in the state of Arizona and anti-immigration legislation that happened there, that this is coming to a pointed, I wouldn't say a turning point, a pointed period that people like Lou Dobbs, that you remember was just 1 hour infomercial for his book in CNN, simply ranting and raving against immigration. But immigration is a force of history, is a force of economy. A society that is aging, such as Western Europe or North America, needs young labor, and young labor will come willy-nilly. If they are welcomed or if they are not welcomed, they will happen by the force of history. Muslim migration has to be seen in the context of this general labor migration. And labor migration is an economic factor that then causes social issues. In my judgment, the events of horrid events of 9/11 were incidental to the larger frame of anti-immigrant sentiments that we have had in this society. And so far as the hostility towards Muslims are concerned over the last decade, this hostility historically has existed against Jews, has existed against Catholics, and simply repeats itself. I remember